Okay, raise of hands. How many years in the business? Everybody less than 5? Okay. More than 5? Obviously everybody else. All right.
More than 25?
Right. So I've been doing this 20 years. Do most of you know who I am, what I do? Okay. Here's a couple of things which I'm going to go through with you. If you text Limitless MHG to that phone number, it'll keep you updated with some tips and tricks that I have and any upcoming events, classes, webinars, those types of things. If you have something that you have a seller that needs a solution, you can't pay cash for it, I can. If you text deal to that number, it'll come back with a link to fill out the quick form and it'll resubmit to me that I can take a look at and get back to you on. Okay. One of the things I want to remind you guys all of, actually one more question, anybody own investment properties? Okay, that's a good show of hands.
Oh, sort of. I live on it. I live on the investment property.
One of the things I'm really passionate about doing this and giving up my time for it is that we get into real estate, we get our license, and nobody ever teaches us the opportunity that comes across and why we should be investing in real estate and what the power of it is. So I'll give you a story on the power of long term. And you know, when I was 19, my parents were both in real estate. I've been doing this 20 years as of July. My parents forced me to buy my first house in '99. Interest rates were 7.5%. I paid 170 grand or 107 grand for the house. My mortgage payment was $950 a month. But as a 23-year-old, 200 grand cash offer in 2003 looked really good. I'm not sure where that 93 grand went. Still don't know where it went. Here's the problem. We look at houses and we look at the cash and the equity in it, and we sell them, and then we don't really do anything with that money. And what happens is, at the end of the day, that house, even though it tanked in the down market, went down to 140, I think. But today the house is worth 275, and it would have been 23 years paid off. So I missed a lot of opportunities. So this class is really to teach you some of the basics just as far as mindset goes. And one of the things we have licenses in comparison to wholesalers and flippers and all these other guys is because our license gives us opportunity to be in front of people that are curious about what to do with their homes, and it gives us opportunities to purchase and acquire those opportunities at the end of the day. So on the worksheet that I gave you, nothing that you have to do right now, but this is really what we're going to go through and what I want you to think about. It's a goal-oriented mindset. While you're doing your day-to-day business, it is definitely an income producing. We're doing our job by selling houses, representing buyers. I still do those things, but I'm also prepared to look at things from the investment side every time. Every time I talk to somebody, it's an opportunity to either help solve a problem or buy a house or do something of that nature. So we want to be prepared for opportunities so that we can hold on to those opportunities. So, and I'll answer these questions in my goals so that you guys can kind of think about it. And everybody's goals are going to be different depending on your age, your time and space, those types of things. So how much passive income do you want at the end of the day? When you're retired right now, what does that look like? Mine, I had 9 years to obtain my goal, which I want my portfolio to produce $50,000 a month in passive income. At what age? By age 50. How many homes at what price? That's going to depend on the market. Right now we're at 35 homes plus some commercial, and we're getting there. So it's kind of asking the reverse question, which is how many homes will it take at what price and what rent to get there? And obviously the market is going to shift up and down. Who's going to manage it? Are you going to manage it? Property management going to manage it? I don't manage any of my own stuff. I don't want the headache, I don't want the hassle. I want to stay involved in my real estate business, not in my rental business. And then do you have reserves for oh shit moments? A lot of one-off landlords, a lot of people that start, they don't have reserves and they don't understand the overall what it's going to take. So what happens is they freak out the minute there's a repair because they weren't planned for it and they weren't given those opportunities to understand what's going to happen. So some of you guys have seen this slide before, and it's really important that you understand that you are your most important client. Okay, you got into the business, your experiences are being developed, you have paid to play, which means you have paid and earned the right for the opportunities, right? So when you have an opportunity to buy a house, it doesn't mean you have to sell it to an investor. It's an opportunity for you. This is my dad. He died 4 years ago. This is a couple of different things. The word limitless, it came from my dad when he passed. And it was the fact that he limited his real estate career and his business on always doing and taking every opportunity and trading it for $1 to an investor that ultimately ended up very, very wealthy. My dad spent the last 5 years of his life working for investors, not with them. And at the end of the day, the investor was not very nice when he left after my dad died, and he broke his promise to my dad that he would make him a wealthy man when he sold all of his properties. And so my dad sold him a little over 500 homes during trustee sale, and my dad kept his prices really low, managed his properties, and his portfolio was worth quadruple when he sold it last year. And he did not keep his promise to my dad. So I tell you this because investors, when you work for them, they're greedy bastards. And they're going to drag you around like a chihuahua on a leash and expect you to do all this stuff for nothing, for the same commission you would get if you just worked with a buyer. So I say all that to make sure that you're working and understanding that you're working with investors, not for them, because you yourself should be an investor. So where do you start? This is a lot of the questions that I get asked. Where do I start in my investment journey? The first thing you need to know is your buy box. Now, this is my buy box. This is what I've created. This is what I believe in. And this buy box comes from stats from the 250 properties that we manage right now and from my own portfolio in what performance happened. So the buy box can be anything you want to make it, as long as it makes sense. But I'm going to show you these pieces here. Location is going to be up to you. My location is typically inside the 101, and 7th Street is about its east boundary. Whoops. So you want to know your buy box, and you want to paint that picture, which is on that worksheet, so that when an opportunity comes up, you're prepared to see that opportunity. You know what it looks like. We've all talked about vision boards and those types of things. What is your vision of what your ideal rental property looks like? And that's what's in it really, really important, so that when you go into a listing appointment, you're preparing for it. Is it the ideal rental property? Is it something I potentially want to buy? So no pools. Pools are a liability, and pools are a detriment when it comes down to cost. What we're trying to do is reduce liabilities here. So pools typically will get you a couple $100 more a month on rent. They will also cost you $110 a month to service. You'll replaster them at the cost of $3,500 to $5,000 every 7 to 10 years, depending on the wear and tear. You also have the tenants that are messing with things and breaking things. So I did a cost analysis over holding a house with a pool for 30 years. And I think the net gain after cost into it was $6,000. So it is not worth the investment on a pool. Smaller, older homes. Anything under 2,000 square feet, single level, is typically my ideal. And there's a couple reasons why. Under 2,000 square feet, you're going to have one AC unit. So we've minimized liability. You get over that, you're typically going to have 2 AC units. So there's an extra problem that comes with the house. That's why I like the smaller, older homes. That kind of defines with no HOAs, because the older homes typically are not going to have them. The reason I don't believe in HOAs for a couple of reasons. One, if you have a $50 a month HOA, over 30 years, it's $18,000 pissed away. You get no return on that 18 grand. If you have 10 homes in HOAs with $50 a month, it's the price of an entire home over the time you've held that portfolio. You don't get any added value out of. What you do get is some added liability. The tenants, the owners are liable for any damage the tenants does to common areas. We had one owner last year that had to pay for a $3,000 common wall because the tenant's grandson ran a car through it. And the tenant only had liability insurance, so they had no way to cover it. Now, we sent them to collections, still a $3,000 cost to the seller or the owner. No condos. Condos come with neighbors and babysitters and tattletales, and usually condos come with a higher HOA expense, sometimes in that $100 to $200 a month. And here's what happens: that 260 or whatever it is, it's coming out of your cash flow, and you're just paying for somebody else's utilities versus a single family. They're responsible for their own utilities. So it's just something that goes on. The other thing too, we were talking, I'm not sure what your name was, I'm sorry. Tom. I was talking to Tom before, and HOAs also come with assessments. He's buying a condo right now where they're negotiating out a $10,000 assessment for all kinds of street work and pipes and this, that, and the other. In condos, if there's ever a problem where we go in a down market again, like we did in 2006, 2007, a lot of those HOAs went defunct because there was nobody paying the HOA fees for years. So it created a lot of assessments to bring the buildings back up to par. I remember this condo complex at 69th and Indian School. It was probably the worst complex I'd ever seen because nobody was paying their HOA fees. And I think the condos were down to $9,000, $10,000, $11,000. No tile roofs. Does everybody know that tile is a cosmetic? It's not the roof. The paper is the roof. Tile roofs were at that age where 1990 was typically where they started with tile. We're at that age that most tile roofs are having to be pulled back and new paper put on, which is a super expensive cost versus a comp shingle roof. And if we have another hailstorm, comp shingle roofs get replaced, tile roofs do not. And then price range is going to depend on your rental market. So in Phoenix, we stay in that under 250 range. With 20% down, it's going to give you a $200 to $300 a month cash flow. And that's kind of what that looks like. So you have to determine what you really want to invest in first. So these are all things that we're trying to do to reduce our long-term liabilities. Things that are going to cost us more money, not give us a rate of return. This is just a picture of one of the properties I own. Comp shingle roof, 1,200 square feet, 2-car garage, tiny backyard, rents for $1,400 a month. And so we cash flow somewhere around $700 a month on that particular property. Keep in mind, I bought it in 2014 for $120, but the house is worth $210, $220 right now. That's the other thing too that you factor in over time is the appreciation. Just don't depend on appreciation. Because one of the disagreements my dad and I used to have was he would tell his investors, well, you're going to get 5% appreciation, 6% appreciation, and then the market tanked. So you got to look at it from a standpoint that the value of the house is not the objective. It's going to be a bonus when you go to sell it. And its value doesn't matter during that time, okay? So a lot of people ask, well, what happens if the market crashes or goes down? Doesn't make any difference to me because these houses are financed on 30-year fixed mortgages. They're cash flowing. Most of my mortgages are right around $1,000 a month right now. So right now in that same price range, even though it's more than what I bought, you're paying $200,000 for your mortgage. The rates are better. You're still going to have a smaller cash flow, and it's always going to be able to be rented. So let's think about the market if it does crash. So what happened in 08 is a little different than right now. You had an influx of rentals causing the rental value to go down. So if I take my portfolio right now and it did what it did in 2008, I'm going to be out about $3,000 a month in negative if it dropped down to $800 a month in rentals. I don't believe that's going to happen. That's my opinion. I know one of the guys in the other class think that we're in for a correction. My firm belief is that, Phoenix's economy in comparison to the national economy is much stronger. We have a ton of growth. We have a ton of people coming in from different places, and we're still one of the most affordable markets in the country. One of the reasons, everybody know we kind of on a shortage of rental properties right now. Okay, rents are up almost 30% over the last 2 years. Our average 3-bedroom, 2-bath rental runs about $1,400 to $1,500 a month right now. So, and our average tenant turn time is about 7 days from vacancy to re-rent. Now, back in 2010, I think my dad was giving away flat screen TVs for people that would lease a house because there was so much inventory. But what's happened over the last 8 years or the last 4 years, the investors that bought in that 2008 timeframe, they have slowly, quietly exited the market. which has caused us, along with 200 people a day relocating here, needing more housing, which we don't have. So it's still a great time to invest with that in mind, that the prices are still going up, and even if they teeter a little bit, it's still not going to make too much of a difference. And keep this in mind. Yeah.
How long is like your average tenant staying?
5 years. 5 years right now.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. Some of that has to do with, I'm not a slumlord. We actually fully renovate our houses before they go to rent. So they're completely done, giving us a little bit higher rent and a little bit more more time from our tenants, because they tend to like their house at the end of the day. We have to remember too, on that side, is that tenants are people too. They want to be proud of where they live. Sometimes it's not all about budget. So by giving them a house that they're proud to live in, they tend to stay longer. And if you're a landlord that makes your repairs, takes care of the tenant, you treat them like people, because they are. A lot of landlords forget that. So here's something that was interesting that I went through last night with somebody, which is, where do you start depending on the age and requirement or where you're at? So let's talk about no money. Okay, some of you guys are younger in here, some of you are older, some of you are already settled in. So if you have no money, and this is usually what everybody's issue is, I think I asked it yesterday, what's keeping you from buying more investment properties, and it's always money, right? So you have one of two choices. You can buy your first home, live in it, it's going to be a rental. So you determine what that house looks like by your buy box. Now you bought that house, you live in it for a year, you update it, you get it ready, and you move again. And there's more steps to that, but these are kind of the overall. You can look for deals because you're owner occupied that have potential equity in them. There's off-market deals. MLS isn't always the greatest place to go if you're going to look for some of that stuff, but there's off-market deals, there's wholesales, all those pieces where you can buy equity in properties to create some of that long-term. And then it's a rinse and repeat. So depending on the stage of life you're at, you don't have kids, you do have kids, maybe they're not settled in schools yet, you just make that part of your retirement game plan. And it's something that, by knowing this and knowing buy box, when I work with first-time home buyers, I always tell them this is the plan. We've got buyers that we sold to yesterday, and that is part of my initial buyer consult, is that, hey guys, you're 25 years old, this house that you're buying, you're not going to sell, but I'm going to come back in a year and make sure you're prepared for year 2 to move again. And we're going to look at the market again, and we're going to look at rents and see if you're ready based on these questions. So it is a way to add to your business at the end of the day if you're teaching people how to build wealth, but you have to understand that you're building wealth too in order to teach somebody. Because I see a lot of different things going on in the market right now with the agents that are selling to investors, and I'll get to that in a second. Then there's the way of, like I'm established in my home. I've pulled equity out of my home for down payments. You can look for equity in properties that need repairs. And, some people have issues with taking equity out to reinvest. But remember, you're moving equity from one place to the next. If you have equity sitting in your home, it's dead. It's not moving, it's not breathing. To where if you're buying that investment property, you found something off market, you found something with some equity, you're actually increasing that money that you're putting down at the end of the day. Some of the other things too that are, again, depending on your business, your income, your model, seller financing. Is everybody familiar with seller carries and what that looks like? It's kind of what we were talking about. So seller carries are when somebody owns a property free and clear. Seller carry is something that, depending on why that person is going to sell, you can potentially take either the owner, or if they're the landlord, and turn them into a bank. So if they own it free and clear, they secure the property or the money that you're buying it for. So let's take a $200,000 house, and no commissions, no closing costs, it's vacant, and you say, seller, I'll give you $160,000 for it. Will you carry the note at 7% interest for 5 years? Their money is secured against the property with a deed of trust. The note is the document that explains the terms of the deal. So what that does is it brings you to a zero down. They're making a cash flow. They've increased their rate of return, and it's a way to secure a property. So believe it or not, we've probably bought 7 of these in the last year. So they're out there. It's asking the question when somebody owns a property free and clear what they intend to do with their money. That's the only question you need to ask is what's your intention with the money? Are you going to invest it? What if I could give you a better rate of return on your money by securing the property and you don't have to put it on the market? So it is a great way. That's kind of something we were talking about as a great way to secure a property. And then there's private funds or relationship funding. Depending on relationships, that's how I built my business, how I built my portfolio is working with investors that have cash. And these aren't technically investors, these are mentors, these are friends, these are relatives, where I've showed them how to invest their money in me and give them a decent rate of return. And now a decent rate of return depends on the person. I've got some people that'll give me money at 6%, I've got some people that'll give me money at 10%. It just depends, but don't go out to, you can certainly vet them. A lot of the traditional hard money guys are 9 to 12% plus a couple of points, so be careful with your traditional hard money. But I say relationships because I guarantee you that there's somebody in your database or friends or family that have money sitting around that they're getting a 2 or 3% return on in the bank that are willing to put it out secured by property. Oops, I screwed that slide up. MLS is not your only option. So everybody understand what wholesaling is? Wholesaling is a contract that is written and it is sold for a fee. So if I write a contract on Tom's house for 110 and I sell it to Mark for 115, I make $5,000. I make the net in between. Okay, so that's what wholesaling is. Relationships. Guys, one of the things I talked about earlier about having a license, people know you do real estate, but people need to know that you're always looking for real estate. Relationships go back to somebody in your neighborhood knowing that you buy houses or you invest, and they're going to come to you first, say, hey, my mom just passed and I've got this house and I really don't want to put it on the market. Are you interested in it? Those relationships, that's how we bought a ton of the homes that we do own now, is just by relationships. And there's past clients, again, if they know that you have that option. Now, you may not be able to pay cash for it, but you know somebody that can, and there's always a way to get paid on that. So it doesn't need to mean that you're the person always buying. It's just that people know that you have that option, because your past clients may come to you and say, have this, is it a rental opportunity? Do I want to get rid of it? So just making sure that people are aware that you don't just do traditional real estate, that you have investors. Even if you did a post on Facebook, I have investors looking for something off market. Does anybody have anything? That kind of brings people out. Hey, I've got this. So just keep that in mind, some of your marketing things. Death and divorce, same thing. That brings a lot of things around. Tired landlords, these are people that have owned properties that are done with the tenants. They're just done with the not getting the returns, the headaches, those types of things. That's another great place. And then mailers. We do some mailers here and there that kind of procure some things, but so last year I spoke to a little bit more than 4,000 real estate agents nationwide, and this was a question that I asked. How many of you own investment properties? There was definitely more than 5% in here that do. So 5% of the agents actually raise their hand. So the other 95% of the industry is not investing in it. They don't invest in what they sell and believe in, supposedly. They're invested in the commission portion of the business. But more importantly, 100% of the agents would sell an investor a property that they know nothing about. And when you're investing in homes, multifamily, any of that stuff, it's a business. My rental portfolio is a business aside from my real estate. And you guys should treat it the same way. It's not just owning houses, it's a business. So you have to maintain that business, and you should really know what you guys are all here because you're wanting to learn about that, which is going to give you a level up, showing your clients that may be interested in investing in real estate. it also is good conversation with your clients of, hey, have you thought about investing in real estate? And getting somebody down that road, because you know what the buy box looks like, you know what the good areas are, and you know how to guide them now. So what are the options? So we talked about single family homes, right? These are the easiest things to get into. They're the most affordable, they're the best things, they're the least pain in the rear end because they're long-term tenants, those types of things. You can get into the vacation rentals. It's extremely lucrative, but it's a lot of work. So you either have to have somebody or know somebody. I've got one in South Scottsdale, and then I have one up in Munns Park that we do vacation rental on. Multifamily, I'll be honest with you, I don't own any multifamily. I've just steered clear of it. Most of the multifamily in Phoenix is in areas I really don't want to be in, so I've stayed away from it. I have vacation homes. Oh, vacation homes. So we own a couple of vacation homes in Munns Park that are actually our primaries. So I own it with a family, another family that we partner with. The interesting part about that business strategy-wise is that both of us are real estate agents, and our teams rent that house from us personally and pays all of its bills. So it's a way to capitalize on owning a vacation rental or a vacation home and have your real estate team actually, or your business, pay for it at the end of the day. And then primary residence hopping, which we talked about. If you're in a primary home right now that would fit the buy box, then think about jumping. Where's my next step? What's my next property look like? So we're back to the same thing again. It's how much passive income do you want? When do you want it? What age do you want it? How many houses is it going to take? And that's why that worksheet is there. And then making sure that you have reserves. I can't stress enough about the reserves, because you don't want to get into it and have the $3,000 fence, the $5,000 AC unit. You just don't want to have those things come up unless you've got a good, steady, solid income, which some of us, you know, it's the roller coaster of real estate. Some months are good, some months are bad, but make sure you put some away. So it's really about investing in your future and making sure that you're looking at all the opportunities in front of you. And this is, again, this is really like the beginning guide of this. There's so much more to it, but sometimes I go off in tangents and then I confuse everybody when everything's all said and done. So there's another sheet on your desk, which is the rental calculator. That's more of a today's version at a today's price, around that $225. But a couple of things I want you to look at there. There's, you know, putting the 20% down or putting the 3% down, but I want you to look at the bottom. Actually, I need one of those sheets so I actually know what the heck I'm talking about. So I thought this was an interesting comparison. If you compare it to somebody putting 20% down versus doing the 3 or 5% down. In column 1, you've got a house that rents for $1,400 a month. Okay, property management fees, $75. Those are going to vary. The property management company that I have a partnership with, which is my mom's company, it's a $75 fee for my home group agents. And then repairs and maintenance, so there's a buffer in here of $100 a month. And then real estate taxes, $125, and then $75 for rental property insurance. And then when you go down, you'll see, you know, property valuation. So if I bought a house for $250 and actually paid, or I'm sorry, the house is worth $250, but I paid $225 for it. So you bought $25,000 worth of equity. And sometimes the way you get to that $25,000 in equity is, keep this in mind. You go on a listing appointment, you're already 10% there. Okay, because most of the time we're talking to sellers about 6% commission, 1% closing costs, and 3% negotiation or closing fees or buyer's concessions, right? So you're already 10% of the way there. So if you can get somebody to move off of that, same conversation we were having, Tom, is you're buying yourself the equity in the property by using your commission and using the buyer's commission that you're just going to pay somebody else anyway. So why not use that to your advantage, because that's kind of the set ratio right now. And then here's probably the most interesting part, is if you look at putting $45,000 down versus the 5%, the $2,050. there's not a lot of difference in your monthly cash flow at the end of the day. So if you look at the bottom, you get $58 a month by putting $45,000 down, or you pay $64 a month and still have $40,000 or $30,000 in your pocket that you can put towards something else. Some of that, and keep in mind there's also $100 a month going into reserves. I'm one of those people, I'm probably over leveraged, but I'm comfortable with my income and what I have going on. But that is certainly a way to buying the owner occupied with $11,000 down. Even though it's costing you $64 a month, you also bought $25,000 worth of equity, and somebody else is paying down the mortgage. And that's the big kicker at the end of the day, is somebody else is paying that down while they're maintaining your asset. So what questions do you guys have about? That's just a brief run through.
If you're doing look at a property as a seller, financing, seller carry, what are they normally expecting you to put, how much cash are they expecting you to give them?
As far as down payment goes?
Yeah.
So there's a couple of different ways. Number one, it's going to depend on the relationship you have with that seller. Okay? We bought them with nothing down. We bought them with $50,000 down. It really depends on what you can work out, and the way you work that out is by asking questions. You know, it's we met with a seller last week that the house didn't sell, and he had it listed at $5. It was probably worth $550. It still needed some repairs. And I asked him, so if you sell the house for free and clear, bless you, where are you going to put your money? Well, it's just going to go in the bank. And I'm like, so what are the interest rates the bank's giving? 2. I'm letting him answer the questions to think about it before I pose the question of, okay, it's listed for $5. You've got $25,000 worth of commissions. The house still needs some repairs. What if I give you $450 and 5% interest on a 5-year balloon? And a 5-year balloon, you got to pay it off or refinance in those 5 years. So he was willing to do it with $25,000 down, but that was his protection from foreclosure. Well, if I have to come back and foreclose on you, I'm like, yeah, I get it. You're probably not going to have to. There's plenty of equity in here, but that's the conversation. So it just depends on where that seller is, and asking them what they plan on doing with their cash once they sell a place. And that's always a question that I ask a free and clear owner. What do you owe? Nothing. Where are you going to put your money when you're done with this? Are you reinvesting into something? Is there a reason? And then you kind of go through the what if scenarios. And if they still want to sell it, that's where a relationship comes from. Hey, would you be willing to do, which we call deed of trust on relationship money. So deed of trust is when they're loaning you money secured by deed of trust in the first position.
So he was going to go into foreclosure?
No.
Oh, he wasn't.
No.
We were talking about. Okay.
No, he had one of those great agents from EXP that did a really half-ass remodel for him, and it didn't go so well. So he wanted out. He saw me on a podcast. He says, "Hey, you've got some creative solutions. Can you tell me how I can get out of this?" So that was my response to him. Because then when I calculated it out, I showed him the first 2 years that I paid the interest-only payment. He's back up to the $500,000 that he was trying to sell the house for, when he'd only be getting 2% return in the bank.
Right. So he did.
Yeah.
Hey Steve, I see on your here, you've got like your cap rates are running about 5.5%, which seems pretty good in this market.
Right.
Before some of these other additional plug fees.
Right.
So I'm just curious. I know I've been having a pretty tough time finding these 5+, and anything off market, the repairs are eating up anyway. So
right.
Can you talk a little bit about because you're so active in this and you're in your market, where you're really seeing that come in, and if you really have to buy, discounted because you're waiving fees and stuff to be able to get it down to where it needs to be.
So, lots of answers there.
I know that's a big question, but
so
bottom line is a 5.5 is pretty tough these days.
Yeah, it is tough, but it depends on the price range, and it depends on our rental right now. So does everybody understand how to get to a cap rate? Cap cap rate is an investment term, which is what you need to know with investors or seller carries, which is always, and I'm terrible at writing, so I apologize up front. So cap rate is your income minus expenses divided by total investment. This is how we're converting, this marker sucks. This is how we're converting a lot of relationship money, because an investor will call and say, you know, I'm looking to get a 10% cap rate. Well, good luck with that. It's not happening on a rental property. You're lucky to get that 5% cash on cash, and it equals out almost the same. And this is the interesting piece, is that when you look at that with financing, and then you look at it, give me the phone. So right now, let's do this. If somebody buys a rental property, I'm going to take the same example there. 220. I need a marker that works. There we go. Okay, they paid $225 cash for it, right? And it rents for $1,400 a month. Actually, it's on the sheet. They have a total income. Well, I'm just gonna go here. This is minus expenses. So you're taking that $12,300 is after their expenses. So you're taking the $225. I'm sorry, the $12,300 and dividing it by the $225 they put in, and they're getting a 5% cap. So even with financing, they're still getting the same cap on the cash they're putting down. So the only way to improve that cap, well, let me show you one more thing here. So this investor with $225,000, that's all they're getting rate of return before an AC unit goes out, before a tenant destroys something, before anything goes wrong. So when I have people come in that are in their 50s and 60s and want to pay cash for rental properties, nope, I'll give you 7 to 8% on your money, guaranteed, secured by a property. That's where we've created our relationships, because I can take them out of this, which can go to zero real quick, and take them into this, and it's guaranteed by the same property, right? So to answer your question, like where are we finding better cap rates? I'm not looking for the caps. I'm looking for the equity.
Even on your own, though.
Even on my own.
Yeah.
So if I buy, so that house is actually a pretty decent example, except for this. Let me show you this number here. I'm going to go negative on this property, because that same house rents for $1,400 a month, and I paid $200 for it. It's worth $250, and I've got a 7% note on it. So the investor's making $14,000 a year, and I bought $50,000 worth of equity, so I'm going $200 a month negative. I'm not looking at caps.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the equity standpoint. Now my long term that I'm refinancing into 30 years.
Out to
right. I'd refinance the same way. And guys, this is where it gets super complicated, but this is exactly how I built my portfolio with almost no money. So all those people that talk about, you know, using other people's money and no money down and this, that, and the other. 2 years ago, the lending guidelines changed. You no longer have to own anything for 12 months seasoning before you can refinance it based on appraised value. It used to be you had to buy it and hold it for 12 months, because they would take the lesser of the two, either the appraisal or what you paid for it, and refinance based on that. Well, if I'm buying something at 80 cents on the dollar, well, the appraisal is going to come in higher and they're still going to take the lower price, which means I still have to put 20% down on this, right? So now I've got $100,000 sitting in this house doing nothing, and I don't want to put that money down. Well, 2 years ago, they changed the guidelines. I can, if I was going to keep that house, it doesn't fit my buy box because it's in an HOA, but I bought the equity. So it's the equity method. Oh my gosh.
You're being pumped.
Can't get
You
a
just
break.
don't know it.
See if the brown one.
The orange one works.
Does it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, it's the equity method. All right. This is the way to buy things if you're settled in your house, you're not wanting to do the moves. This is the way you use part of that commission, some of those things, and that's why I said if you get the seller to move to a certain thing. So I have a 250 house. I paid $200 for it, right? I've got $50,000 in equity.
How are you doing that?
Huh?
You're saying it's worth 250. How are you paying 200?
Because the investor called, he says, I want to net $50,000 and I want out. And that was his price. He knew tenants were in it. What's that? So the investors a lot of times come to me and they're like, hey, I don't want to put it on the market. I need $50,000 net. And it goes through that. So, and I always tell these guys, well, we could wait. And we could get the tenant out and go for this. He's like, no, I don't want to wait. I'm good with this. I've owned it for 12 years. I'm good. You'd be amazed at how many people, just like we talked about the zoo earlier, or the iBuyer, there's a lot of people out there willing to leave money on the table for their convenience. You just have to be the one they contact for it. Thank you. Okay, when you do a next day refinance, I can close on this tomorrow with my 7% hard money, and I can go to my lender and refinance it based on the appraised value next day. You can't do it cash though. So you pay cash for it, it's considered a cash out refinance. So you have to secure a lien against the property however you do it. Here's the other piece, or the other kicker, is when you do a non-cash out next day refinance based on appraised value, they're going to require 75% LTV, which means you're a little bit more than the 20% down standard. But how many of you would rather put $13,000 down rather than $45,000 down? Mm-hmm. Right? So the equity method is finding a seller that's willing to sell you the house with some equity in it that you can turn around and next day refinance and have as little money out of his pocket and as much equity. So now I've got $62,000 in equity in the house, and it's definitely cash flowing because it meets that 180 loan amount at the end of the day. And that's how you use the equity in a deal to refinance and keep it. Questions on that? Confusion on that? Yeah.
I guess I'm a little confused. So when you refinance with the equity method, you're only putting the 13. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
Because you're using the spread right here as the down payment, but they want you, the bank is going to require you to leave 25% equity in it when you do a non-cash out refinance. Now, if you're buying it regularly, you'd only have to put $45,000 down as far as the 20% goes.
Okay.
But this is the way to acquire more properties with less money down.
Okay. But you're still going to have to come out with some money.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, but then you reverse it where we've had a couple of ours where, let's say I bought this for 190 and I put some repairs into it, now it's worth 275. Now there's 25% equity in it that we're using for down payment.
Okay.
So, I mean, if you get lucky and the appraisal comes in at 265, then you're coming out of pocket with almost nothing.
Okay, nice.
That answer any of your questions regarding the caps?
Yeah, I was just curious. I mean, this is all good. It was more just because I get a lot of investor calls too, and I want to blah, blah, blah cap it. I'm like, you're not going to buy it. You know, it's just not going to happen.
So as far as investors wanting rentals or cash buyers or?
No, investors wanting rentals and they want, you know, they're all looking for their 7% cap, and I'm like, it's never going to happen.
Not right now, even with where rents are, unless you're
Yeah.
buying stuff, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens if you can find stuff, again, off
Right.
market.
Well, I'm not a wholesaler, right, so.
Yeah, but you don't, I'm not either.
Yeah,
I'm not. I'm an opportunist
for
when
sure.
it comes down to it.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's being prepared to connect the dots.
Yeah,
You know, so you don't have to be a wholesaler, but it's okay. I can buy a $150,000 house in Maryville that rents for $1,300 and they're going to get a 7% cap.
right.
I can't tell you it's going to be the best of rental at the end of the day,
Yeah.
but that's possible when you get into those price ranges. But you have to find those off markets. But keep this in mind: if you're working with an investor that's trying to find something like that, the wholesale market, they're all their lists are looking for fix and flip, and there's usually not enough skin in it at all.
No,
But if they're looking for long-term hold,
yeah,
it's a whole different ballgame. And that's, again, where you're looking at your owner-occupied stuff. So you got to figure out some different methods. You know, if I was an owner-occupant, I'd be looking at the wholesale list, because you know that there's not enough spread for people to flip,
yeah,
but there's still some equity you can purchase.
for sure, yeah.
Any more questions? Tom, does that make sense, like on the seller carry and some of the other stuff?
Yeah.
Leverage is one of those things that obviously, the reason the market happened here, which is another reason I don't believe we're going to see that happen again, especially not to the extent that it was. If the market dips 10%, who cares? You know, it's not going to make a difference. If you bought a house you can afford to live in right now, it doesn't matter, right? The big reason that 2008 happened was because people were taking neg-am loans out, and they were basing everything they bought on appreciation, not on rents. So when the market started to dip, their mortgage balance was going up, and the further it got away, the worse it got for them. So we don't have any of those things holding or propping up our market when it comes down to the prices with the false loans. You know, I mean, God, in 2008, my dog could get a loan. And that's just one of those pieces that I believe that our market is going to stay very stable, and we still have that shortage of inventory. And the other piece that kind of goes with it, from hearings from some of the big hedge funds looking at the rental market, people's income has not increased as much as house prices are, right? So we talk about all the things that are factors in the buy box that are liabilities. Well, homeowners have the same liabilities, right? So a lot of people are looking at the rental versus the home ownership and saying, well, screw it, I'll just go rent. It's a fixed cost of living, I have a fixed income, and I don't have the liabilities. Versus somebody that wants to buy a house and not, or have those liabilities, because let's face it, we buy a house and we live in it, and we live at Home Depot and we're hiring contractors, and so you're spending more money to where, and it's one of the reasons we renovate our rentals is because the people feel like it's home, they know it's being taken care of, and it's more of a concierge thing, and they've got a fixed cost of living at the end of the day. I'll just sit up here and spin around in circles. Does everybody understand, like, the business is really about opportunities? And if you can, here's something I taught about yesterday, which was, Mark mentioned a little bit, value proposition. I do believe, and I've seen it, I don't know, has everybody seen where all of a sudden the co-broks are all over the place? They're 2.5, somebody had a $3,800 one the other day on a $250. I'm like, what is going on out here?
It's nuts.
But what you have to look at and be more focused on is the income and solving people's problems. And the bigger the problem you can solve, the more money you're going to earn or get paid to do. The reason I was able to buy $50,000 worth of equity is because I was able to buy the house. I was able not to take him down the road of, well, let's put it on the market and let's do the paperwork and let's do all this other stuff. He just passed the problem on to me. But for me, it's a short-term hold. I'll either hold it until the tenants go out, or I'll put it back out to an investor at a discounted rate. But I'm gonna close on it. I'm not gonna wholesale it. I'm gonna put it in my inventory and we'll work through it. And you know, that did really, really well from the standpoint of I have flips that are, you know, gonna provide income down the road when a tenant gets out, or that I can turn into long-term rentals. Is anybody buying anything right now or looking to buy anything? You are? Yeah.
Every day.
Every day.
Always. How about the LLC lending right now? On these cash, or the refis on them? Do you have a lender that you love that is good with LLCs?
That's lending to LLCs. All my stuff is personal, and then we flip it back into our LLC, so it's personally guaranteed. There is one guy, Scott Bacherish. I forget which company he's with. If you text me or email me, I'll get it to you. He does lend on cash flow.
Okay.
And so they will lend directly to the LLC, which is nice. And you make a good point there for, does anybody have any goals? Like anybody want to own 10 homes or more or less or anything like that? Okay.
30.
Huh? 30? Speak up, son. So when we get down to it, there's also strategy in what that looks like. Okay? So when we started out, everybody understand the conforming guidelines with loans. So Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, you are allowed to have 10 loans in your name, right? If you're going to do it and your spouse has income, my wife and I, we have 2 separate companies, so we have separate income. Well, we have one primary, which reality was one of us should have owned the primary loan. And we have 20 total available loans in conforming guidelines. Once you go out of conforming guidelines, you have to go to some of the higher rate lenders or you go to private financing. But again, the conforming loans are the ones that are giving you the best interest rates. Like right now, I think you can get a 4.5 investor loan right now on conforming. We're out of them though. So you want to make sure that part of your plan when you're doing these, if you have the income and your wife has some income, that you guys are each doing loans separately so that you can take advantage of that totally, all the way up to 20 loans. And then once you get past that, then you go into, like I said, you go into some of the non-conforming guideline stuff, which requires either some money down or it's based on credit and cash flow. So like the Scott's, his is, we have to leave 15% equity in it.
On the LLC?
Yeah,
Okay.
on the house. So it's an 85% LTV, but our rate was 6.3% on a 30-year fixed.
I'm sorry, on a how many year fixed?
30-year
On a 30-year
fixed.
fixed?
There's no balloon payment or anything on it, but the house just had to cash flow $100 a month.
That's easy. And does he, like points, is he tough on the fees?
It was 1.5 points.
And his name's Scott, I'll text you.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep. So he's a good one with the non-conforming and putting it in the LLCs.
So you always set up your LLCs after you get your financing?
No, we buy everything in an LLC. We have kind of a crazy structure per the attorney. So we have a holding company, and the holding company breaks out into another managing member, which is another holding company for all of our rental properties. And then the other one splits off and holds all of our flips, so we keep them in separate entities. So you can create LLCs super simple online, and that's what we keep the rentals in. So we keep one rental per LLC for liability purposes. Some people, they group them together. It just, everybody's got a different idea of how to do it. Do you have LLCs now that you're putting them in?
Not yet, no.
Are you just thinking about it?
Thinking about it.
Yeah. So it's a good protection. Reason we don't keep more than one is so that the LLC stops. Like the tenant can go after the equity, but that's it. It doesn't break anything else. And one of the great protections on that stuff, if you start getting into corporate and breaking umbrellas, is making sure that you have a personal umbrella policy. They're super cheap. you can get a couple $1 million umbrella policy for about $800 a year. And I'll just add a little bit of value on that. When my wife first got in the business, she had a car accident with a client in the car, and we got sued for 6 years for these people for the car accident that happened. But we had an umbrella policy, so it never made it through car insurance or anything like that. So it's just it's a cheap protection item, especially for those of us that are in real estate, because just about anything can happen. It's quiet today. Is there any value in that today?
Absolutely.
Give me your best takeaway from today.
I had messaged you on Facebook about the equity method. I wanted to see what you were doing there.
Okay.
Because I lead generate a lot. I'll cold call whatever, and I find the opportunities, but I just haven't kind of figured out how to do it.
Capture it.
Yeah, how to capture it.
Okay.
So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, that's my hour.
Well,
So,
thank you.
You're welcome.
That's very helpful.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Is everybody else hot? Kelly's got me in the hot box.
This one, no. Yeah, sure is, dude. I was a disaster now for sure.
Oh, is it? Yes. And I'm checking prices on
God, should we pull up on the 6 and 12? Don't stop the car. Here's a dime bag in the
Alyssa Peterson.
playing it.
So do you carry? How
I'm trying to find somebody to get off that.
So we carry a 250, 500 policy. So that's the max policy you can carry. No, it's just a liability policy. You just up it. And you can, like, if you're on our team, we have you name Valentine Group as an additional insurer. Because here's what happened. Let's say you're in the car with a client. The client's looking for the deepest pockets possible. Well, they're going to look above you and look at the brokerage. And so they're going to name the brokerage in the lawsuit for the car accident because they were out showing houses. And then you get to pay for the attorney's